Gentlemen, silence is power in a world where everyone's chasing, calling, texting. When you stop, something unexpected happens. You change the game. Today, I'm going to reveal 6 powerful things a woman will do when you stop contacting her. This is not a game. It's about reclaiming your time, your energy, and your masculine edge. Let's get into it. The moment you stop contacting her, something subtle but powerful begins to unfold in her mind. At first, it might not even register as a big deal. After all, people get busy, right? But then a few hours turn into a day into 2, and then she realizes you're not just busy, you're gone. That's when the wondering starts, and I don't mean casual curiosity. I mean a deep, nagging mental loop that begins playing over and over again in her head, asking the same fundamental question. Asterisk, why did he stop? Asterisk C, most men don't realize how psychologically wired many women are to expect attention, especially if they're used to being the center of it. Whether it was daily texts, good morning messages, quick responses, or just casual banter, your presence becomes part of her routine. You were predictable. She knew you were there. That gave her comfort, even if she didn't always appreciate it. But now, that certainty has disappeared. You've created a void, and that void starts to feel uncomfortable. Not because you were overly important to her at first, but because human psychology is sensitive to patterns, and when patterns break, the brain scrambles for meaning. She starts replaying the last few interactions. Was there something she said wrong? Did she push too far? Was she not affectionate enough, or maybe too cold? She may even try to convince herself that she doesn't care, that she didn't really need you around anyway. But that's her ego talking. Deep down, she's trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces, and the longer you stay silent, the more powerful the puzzle becomes. You might not be speaking to her, but you're very much living rent-free in her mind. This is how masculine silence works. It doesn't shout, it doesn't plead, it doesn't chase. It just removes itself and lets the weight of absence do the talking. And unlike loud arguments or emotional pleas, absence isn't something she can fight or manipulate. It's just there, unchanging, undeniable. Now here's the part most men overlook. It's not always about her missing you immediately. It's about her missing the feeling of being wanted . That loss of validation is deeply unsettling for someone who relied on your attention to maintain her sense of control or importance. And ironically, the more emotionally indifferent she acted when you were around, the more rattled she feels when you finally stop giving her energy. Because now her control is gone, the leash has snapped, and the silence is deafening. She might start talking to friends about it, asking what it means. She might scroll through your old messages, looking for clues. Or she might do nothing at all, on the outside. But make no mistake, the wondering is happening, quietly, internally, constantly, because silence triggers the mind in ways words never could. She expected you to keep trying, to reach out again, to fold like most men do. But when you don't, you disrupt her expectations. You introduce mystery, and mystery is powerful. This is where the shift starts. You're no longer just a guy she used to talk to. You're now a question she can't answer. A door that closed without warning, and depending on her emotional maturity, she'll either reflect or she'll react. But either way, that first phase, the wondering, that's where your silence begins its work. You've removed your presence, you've removed your need, and now she's left with the echo of everything you didn't say. After the confusion and initial mental scrambling that comes from your silence, something else starts to happen. She begins to test you. This is where things get subtle, even strategic. It won't always be obvious. She's not going to come out and say, "Hey, why did you stop talking to me?" Because that would require vulnerability, and for many women, especially those with high egos or emotional walls, that's not something they're ready to give up just yet. Instead, what she'll do is initiate small, calculated moves designed to provoke a response without directly confronting the silence you've created. This is the bait phase. She might send you a vague text out of nowhere like, "Hey stranger," or "Just saw something that reminded me of you." It's casual enough to play off if you ignore it, but strategic enough to reel you back in if you bite. She might comment on something you post online, react to your stories, or even post something obviously tailored to grab your attention, like a song lyric that mirrors your last conversation, a picture designed to make you jealous, or a caption that seems aimed directly at your silence. These aren't coincidences, they are tests. What's important to understand is that these tests are not about reconnecting in a genuine way. They're about regaining control. She's trying to find out if she still has access to you, if you're still emotionally available, if you'll break your silence just because she gave you a breadcrumb. And the worst mistake you can make here is mistaking these little tests for sincerity, because they're not. They're not apologies, they're not reflections, and they're certainly not vulnerability. They are power plays, subtle attempts to draw you out without her having to expose herself emotionally. Here's where Stoic discipline separates the average man from the grounded, high-value one. Most guys take the bait. They respond quickly, thinking maybe she misses me, or she finally came around. But what they don't realize is that the moment you break your silence too early, you've confirmed her power over you. You've reassured her that no matter how long she goes cold or how she treats you, you'll still come back the moment she dangles a little attention in your direction. That gives her back all the leverage, and once she knows she can still pull your strings, the dynamic returns to one where she holds the upper hand, and your silence loses its power entirely. But if you don't respond, if you stay grounded, indifferent, and focused on your purpose, then the test fails, not because you played a game better, but because you refuse to play it at all. And that's where things start to get interesting. The test, once failed, doesn't make her walk away in triumph. It makes her spiral deeper into uncertainty. Why didn't he respond? Is he really over me? Has he moved on? Now, the test that was supposed to give her answers only brings more questions. And when questions remain unanswered, curiosity turns into obsession. Sometimes the tests get more intense. If the light bait doesn't work, she may escalate. She might show up where she knows you'll be, post something provocative, or even send a more emotionally charged message, something designed to elicit guilt, confusion, or sympathy. She's throwing emotional darts in the dark, hoping one hits you hard enough to break your frame. And if you're not aware of what's happening, you might fall for it. Not because you're weak, but because her actions tap into your desire for connection, for closure, for clarity. But clarity doesn't come from reacting to her tests. It comes from observing them without getting emotionally entangled. Her tests are reflections of her own internal discomfort. She's not reaching out because she suddenly values you more. She's reaching out because your silence disrupted the emotional feedback loop she was used to. And in that disruption, her own insecurities are bubbling to the surface, She's trying to regain certainty. She's trying to feel powerful again. But when you don't respond, when you remain silent, focused, and detached, you show her that her old ways of controlling attention no longer work on you. That's when the dynamic truly shifts, not because you played hard to get, but because you embodied a mindset where your energy isn't up for negotiation. You don't chase validation. You don't respond to crumbs. You honor yourself enough to let tests fail without explanation, and that, in itself, becomes the greatest test for her. As your silence stretches longer, something fascinating begins to occur. She starts to mirror your energy. And on the surface, this might look like she's completely unbothered. You go quiet, and now suddenly she's quiet too. No messages, no likes, no signs of life. She stops watching your stories, stops interacting with your content, maybe even unfollows you. It can seem like she's just moved on without a second thought. But this mirroring isn't as simple as it appears. It's not always a true reflection of emotional detachment. In many cases, it's a calculated move, one that's fueled by pride, ego, and the desire to maintain control over how she is perceived. Women, particularly those who are used to being pursued, are acutely aware of social dynamics. They understand the value of looking indifferent. Indifference, in the world of emotional chess, is a form of power. When you withdraw your energy and attention, her ego takes a hit. Whether she realizes it consciously or not, the balance of power has shifted. She no longer feels in control of the emotional tempo between you, and instead of expressing vulnerability, such as asking what's wrong or reaching out with honesty, she attempts to restore her image by matching your distance. It's a self-protective mechanism. It's her way of saying, if you can act like I don't matter, I'll do the same. But here's the catch. While she's mirroring your silence externally, internally, it's rarely that calm. Women tend to process emotions more inwardly at first, so when they pull back in response to your silence, what they're really doing is buying themselves time. Time to observe, time to analyze, time to see if you'll break before they do. This isn't just about detachment. It's a standoff, a silent war of willpower where neither party wants to be the first to blink. And the more invested she was in your attention before, the more pressure she feels now to appear unaffected. This is where many men slip. They start to doubt their approach. They look at her mirroring behavior and think, well, maybe she doesn't care after all. Maybe she's really done. And that thought, born from insecurity and impatience, can drive them right back into her inbox, trying to restart something she may have already been losing interest in. But the reality is, she's often still deeply engaged, just not visibly. You're still on her mind even if you're not in her messages. Your silence didn't erase you. It forced her to reframe you in her psyche. Mirroring is a defense, not always a declaration of indifference. It's her way of trying to regain composure. It's an attempt to show herself, and maybe others, that she's not affected even when she is. She may even start adopting your behavior in other areas. If you became more focused on yourself, on your goals, on your fitness or career, she might suddenly do the same, not necessarily because she wanted to, but because you set a new standard without saying a word. Your actions planted seeds of reflection, and now, rather than admit your impact, she chooses to replicate it as a form of silent validation. Sometimes mirroring becomes a competition. She posts more often. She tries to look happier, busier, more desirable. She wants you to see it, to believe she's thriving without you. But the need to project an image of thriving is often a sign that she's not fully thriving at all. It's effort driven by emotion, Authentic peace rarely needs to be proven. If she were truly indifferent, she wouldn't need to mirror anything. You'd simply fade from her thoughts. But the fact that she's reacting, even if it's silently, proves that your absence created a reaction. It's easy to get fooled by the facade, to believe that her mirroring means she's done, but silence is deceptive, especially when used as a shield. She's playing a role now, the role of the unaffected one, the one who's just living her life, the one who doesn't need anyone. But pay close attention. When a woman goes out of her way to prove she doesn't care, there's usually care hiding behind the performance. If she really didn't think about you, she wouldn't need to prove it at all. This phase of mirroring can last a while, and it can be confusing. It can even trigger self-doubt in the strongest men. But this is where emotional discipline becomes critical. You have to understand that her mirroring doesn't change your mission. Your Stoic path is not about control, it's about self-respect. If you acted from a place of grounded masculinity when you went silent, then her imitation of your energy is simply confirmation that your absence created impact. And while she mirrors your behavior on the outside, inside she's waiting, watching, hoping you'll give her something, any signal that her strategy is working, a comment, a reaction, a view, a message. Something that breaks the silence, something that validates her once more. But if you give her nothing, if you remain silent, still, and self-contained, then her mirroring starts to lose its grip. She's no longer responding to your energy, she's trapped in her own. And that's when the mask begins to slip. Eventually, after the wondering, the testing, and the mirroring phases, a shift occurs in her emotional state. She begins to feel the absence not just mentally, but emotionally and physically. And this isn't just about missing someone she used to talk to. It's about feeling the loss of a presence that used to give her identity a subtle sense of importance, validation, or emotional grounding. When you were consistently reaching out, engaging, showing care, interest, and maybe even affection, it created a rhythm. That rhythm becomes embedded in her daily life. It doesn't matter whether she fully appreciated it while it was happening or not. Once it's removed, the emotional void it leaves behind can feel disorienting. She begins to feel it in the quiet moments. At night, when she's alone and the distractions of the day fade, when she's scrolling through her phone and your name doesn't appear, when she sees something funny or meaningful and reflexively wants to send it to you, only to realize there's a silence where your presence used to be. That's when it hits deeper, because now it's not about pride, not about strategy, not about who's winning the silent standoff. Now it's about emotional weight, emotional familiarity, that sense of connection, even if it was imperfect, that once grounded her attention and emotional energy. The fascinating thing about human attachment is that it often grows in the silence, not in the noise. When something or someone is constantly available, the mind tends to undervalue it. It takes it for granted. But when it's removed without warning, without conflict, and without closure, the emotional memory of that presence becomes louder. The brain tries to fill in the blanks, to make sense of what happened. And the heart begins to miss what the mind can't fully explain. That's when she starts to reflect, not just on you, but on herself, on how she handled the situation, on the things she said or didn't say, on whether she pushed too hard, played too many games, or simply failed to value what she had when it was right in front of her. And here's the truth: silence gives her space to feel. In a world where constant distraction is just a tap away, that silence becomes a mirror she can't escape from. It forces her to face the rawness of her own emotions without interference, without external comfort, and without the crutch of your consistent attention. It's in that emotional stillness that she starts to process the true meaning of your absence. And that process is not always graceful. Sometimes it brings regret. Sometimes it brings anger not necessarily at you, but at herself. Sometimes it surfaces insecurities she's buried under her confidence and appearance. She might not express any of this outwardly. She might still post selfies, act unbothered, and live her public life like nothing has changed. But inside, the emotional climate has shifted. Now she starts to revisit the conversations, replays the tone in your voice, reanalyzes the messages she once dismissed, thinks about your presence in ways she never did when you were around, and the deeper she feels that void, the more valuable your silence becomes. Not because it's manipulative, but because it reflects a powerful boundary she didn't expect you to hold. Most men cave. Most men chase. Most men would have reached back out after a day or two of being ignored, or after a weak bait message. But you didn't. You disappeared, not in a petty or angry way, but with purpose, with calm, detached strength. That absence now speaks louder than any words ever could. There's also a physiological element to this. Attachment affects the body, not just the mind. The human body gets used to certain hormonal responses. Dopamine from attention, oxytocin from emotional bonding, even adrenaline from tension or playful arguments. When those rhythms stop abruptly, it creates withdrawal symptoms very similar to addiction. That's not poetic language, that's biology. So when she suddenly stops receiving the emotional highs that your attention once gave her, her body and emotions go through a type of withdrawal. She may feel anxious, restless, even sad, without fully connecting those feelings back to you, but they're there, quietly shaping her mood, influencing her thoughts, and making her increasingly aware that something she once had is no longer there. At this stage, the emotional impact of your silence becomes undeniable, and it doesn't just affect how she views the past, it begins to influence how she views herself. Was she too arrogant, too cold? Did she expect too much? Did she play herself out of a connection that had genuine potential? These are not light questions. These are deeply introspective, and they emerge only when the noise of ego fades and is replaced by the stillness of solitude. What started as just you pulling back has now evolved into her confronting parts of herself she may have ignored. Your silence becomes a catalyst, not just for her missing you, but for her becoming more aware of her emotional patterns. It shows her what happens when a man refuses to be a pawn in her game, when a man values himself enough to walk away, not with words, but with dignity, and that realization, no matter how silently it arrives, hits her with far more force than any confrontation ever could. As the emotional weight of your absence grows heavier, she begins to experience a deep internal conflict that is often invisible to the outside world. It's a battle between pride and vulnerability, two opposing forces that pull her in different directions. On one hand, her pride insists that she must remain strong, unaffected, and in control. This pride tells her to maintain the facade of indifference, to act like she's moved on, and to avoid showing any cracks in her armor. It pushes her to guard her emotions fiercely, not because she isn't affected, but because she fears appearing weak or desperate. But on the other hand, vulnerability creeps in. Vulnerability is raw, uncomfortable, and often frightening, especially when you've built walls around your feelings to protect yourself. It challenges her pride by demanding honesty with herself about what she truly feels and why. This internal tug-of-war can create immense psychological tension. She may find herself crying alone, writing unsent messages, or replaying moments in her mind that she once dismissed. This is where the silence you initiated begins to unravel the emotional defenses she carefully constructed. This struggle can also cause her to oscillate between extremes, moments of cold detachment followed by waves of longing. Sometimes she'll convince herself she's better off without you, that your silence is a blessing, or that she's stronger than she thought. Then, moments later, she might be overwhelmed by the realization of what she's lost, the connection that slipped away, and the absence of your voice or presence in her life. These emotional swings are exhausting and confusing, further deepening her internal conflict. She might blame herself for pushing too hard or not showing enough interest. She might question if she was too proud or if she underestimated what you meant to her. This internal battle also forces her to confront the nature of her attachment to you. Was it genuine affection, or was it the comfort of your attention? Did she love the idea of you, or the man you actually are? These questions don't have easy answers, but they shake the foundation of her feelings. The silence you imposed creates the space for these difficult reflections, which can lead to profound personal growth or intense regret. It's often in this emotional crucible that she realizes her previous behavior, whether manipulative, indifferent, or inconsistent, pushed you to withdraw in the first place. Her vulnerability might make her consider reaching out, but the pride that battles inside her often stops her. Pride doesn't want to admit defeat. It doesn't want to show that your silence affected her so deeply. This is why she might resort to indirect attempts at communication, cryptic messages, social media posts aimed at catching your eye, or even mutual friends subtly trying to find out if you'll reconnect. These are all extensions of her vulnerability masked by pride. It's a dance of uncertainty where she's both hoping for your return and terrified of the outcome. Throughout this internal conflict, she's also processing the loss of control. When you stopped contacting her, you took away the emotional leash she had on you. That shift destabilizes her sense of power in the relationship. The struggle between pride and vulnerability isn't just about feelings. It's about regaining control over a situation that suddenly feels unpredictable and unfamiliar, and that can be deeply unsettling. The longer the silence lasts, the more she wrestles with this loss of control, and the more it forces her to face uncomfortable truths about herself and the dynamic you once shared. In this intense emotional space, your silence becomes a mirror, not just reflecting her feelings about you, but reflecting her relationship patterns, fears, and unmet needs. She's compelled to look inward, to evaluate not only how she felt about you, but how she approaches connection, attachment, and intimacy in general. This internal confrontation can be transformative if she's willing to embrace it, but it's also painful. The duality of pride and vulnerability creates a storm inside her, a storm that won't settle until she either reaches out, finds closure on her own, or learns to accept the reality of your absence. When you stop contacting her, one of the most profound shifts that happens is that she begins to reevaluate her sense of self and her expectations, not just about you, but about relationships in general. This phase is less about you directly and more about how your absence forces her to confront her own patterns and beliefs. Often, women are deeply attuned to the emotional feedback they receive from those close to them. And when that feedback suddenly disappears, it creates a psychological void that demands explanation. She starts to question not only why you withdrew, but what that means about her worth, desirability, and the dynamics she allows in her relationships. This internal reevaluation is a complex process that can stir up insecurities that may have been dormant or hidden behind confidence and outward strength. It's a moment where she must confront the possibility that perhaps she didn't value you enough, or that her behavior, whether it was neglectful, demanding, or inconsistent, contributed to the silence you chose. These thoughts aren't comfortable, and they can create a mixture of guilt, regret, and confusion. The mental back and forth of what did I do wrong, or was I too much or too little, can dominate her thoughts, creating a restless mind that seeks answers but often finds none. In this quiet turmoil, she might begin to realize that the connection you had was more significant than she allowed herself to admit when you were in constant contact. Familiarity often breeds complacency. Constant availability dulls the sense of value. Your silence disrupts this complacency. It forces her to acknowledge that your presence wasn't just background noise, but a meaningful part of her emotional landscape. The absence of your voice, your attention, and your energy becomes a stark reminder of what she took for granted. It's an uncomfortable awakening that can make her question how she will handle relationships in the future, especially with someone who sets firm boundaries and values himself. This phase also brings a heightened awareness of the standards she holds for herself and others. She starts to see what she expects from a partner, not just in terms of attention or affection, but respect, consistency, and emotional maturity. If your silence came as a response to her own inconsistent or disrespectful behavior, she may come to recognize that she tolerated patterns that weren't healthy. This can be an eye-opening realization that challenges her previous notions of what a relationship should look like. It may prompt her to rethink the qualities she truly values in a partner and, by extension, how she wants to be treated. The reevaluation also extends to her own emotional independence. When someone is accustomed to regular contact and validation from another person, their emotional well-being can become intertwined with that connection. Your absence can feel like a sudden withdrawal of emotional support, and in response, she might feel a surge of loneliness or vulnerability. But it's also an opportunity, one that forces her to develop a stronger sense of self-reliance. Without your constant presence, she is challenged to find fulfillment and validation from within rather than from external sources. This can be a difficult process, but it's a critical step toward emotional growth and healthier future relationships. During this time, she may also reflect on the communication styles and emotional availability in the relationship. If the silence you imposed was a reaction to feeling ignored, undervalued, or manipulated, she might come to see how important genuine connection and openness are. The absence you create becomes a silent lesson about the importance of respect and balanced effort in relationships. It can expose any imbalance she tolerated and highlight the value of mutual care. This insight might not lead her back to you, but it often shapes how she approaches intimacy going forward. Finally, this phase of reevaluation is accompanied by an emotional recalibration. As she processes the absence of your contact, she begins to adjust her emotional expectations and boundaries. She learns, often unconsciously, that not every relationship is meant to be constant, nor should emotional energy be given without reciprocation. Your silence teaches her, in a subtle but powerful way, about the limits of her influence and the importance of self-respect, not just for you, but for herself. This realization can be transformative, altering how she values herself and how she approaches connection, trust, and vulnerability in the future. This journey she goes through, triggered by your silence, can ultimately lead to growth, clarity, and a deeper understanding of herself and what she truly wants. Whether or not your paths cross again, the impact of your absence reshapes her perspective on love, respect, and emotional boundaries. And in that silent space you created, a powerful transformation takes place, one that teaches both of you the value of presence, the strength in detachment, and the importance of honoring your own worth above all else.